You want me to talk first? All right. Well, I was asked to discuss the Alianza del Pacifico, the alliance, the Pacific Alliance that has been recently, within the last 3 years, been formed among Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. It's obviously the latest in a very long series of regional integration groups. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Regional integration groups in focusing on Latin America, and in some respects I think a very promising one, but as with all regional integration initiatives, there are quite a number of questions, and the not only the details but the effectiveness of implementation will be remain questions as the process for this agreement comes close to being 3 years old. It's obviously a very different group in many respects from the 5 or 6, depending on whether you want to include Bolivia for Mercosur. These 4 countries have a total of a little over 200 million people compared to a lot more in terms of probably closer to 280 million if you would include, again, the whole 6 in Mercosur. They represent about 50% of Latin America trade with the world, about 40% of inward investment. They're home, particularly in Mexico, to some of the world's most dynamic multinational enterprises. With several of them, Peru and Chile, China has become by far and away the largest export destination. That and the geographical presence in the Pacific Rim has, I think, had a lot to do with much of the focus of this arrangement. The objectives obviously include better trade relations with Asia, the typical and difficult efforts to reduce poverty and increase have better income distribution, and in general to deal with these endemic issues in a more effective manner. Inter-regional trade is very low, which isn't really surprising if you look at the geography. Obviously, Peru and Chile are adjacent, but it's a long way to Colombia and an even longer way to Mexico. Their interregional trade is much smaller than in some of these other groups. Central America, 3%. In NAFTA, it's about 40%, and Mercosur is about 16 or 17%. So, in terms of regional trade, they will have a very long way to go. The countries are all considered relatively progressive, and obviously there may be disagreement among the panelists as to what that ought to mean in terms of openness. The first 3 and the 5th positions on the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index belong to these 4 countries. Their unemployment is lower than a lot of other parts of the regions, around 7%. Inflation about 2.7%, again very low compared to 4.5% in Latin America overall, and probably close to 50% today in Venezuela. The prognosis, at least by the International Monetary Fund and the other IFIs, is that 2014 is going to be a pretty good year, and that all of these countries have relatively sound economic policies. As we've seen in the last 2 years, some of these predictions are a lot more likely to be accurate than others. It's a very speculative process. These are all countries which are very strong advocates of regional trade agreements, of free trade agreements. Chile is party to agreements with 60 countries, 30 in Colombia, 44 in Mexico, and 50 in Peru. Most of them, everybody except Colombia, has huge networks of bilateral investment treaties or investment chapters in regional trade agreements. So they all have been very, very extensively involved in the kind of regional arrangements, and of course the BITs and many of these agreements are not regional, except in the sense that they're not negotiated in Geneva. This is being done at a time, obviously, where these countries see the potential for greater trade with the more dynamic Asian economies, even though their natural resources exports to China, certainly Colombia, Peru, and Chile, have declined a bit in recent years, as with everybody else. There are many studies which show that north-south trade will be less important than south-south trade in another 4 or 5 years. So they're obviously spending a lot of time focusing on some of these more dynamic middle and upper middle income countries in Asia, not in addition to Japan. Like many other regional trade agreements, they're focused less on tariff reduction per se, since all of them have relatively low tariffs as it is, more on things like making value chain development and manufacturing easier, trade facilitation, the same kinds of issues that seem to be faltering yet again in Bali at the WTO as we speak, and trying to find ways of making it easier for countries, for enterprises to either finished goods or components in all of these countries. Therefore, you don't have a real focus on tariffs or even non-tariff barriers, but they're looking at all sorts of other issues, common trade promotion agencies, as the one in Turkey, integration of securities markets, regular coordination in pharmaceutical and cosmetic sectors, consistency in technical barriers to trade and phytosanitary regulation, government procurement, openness. Chile probably leads the way in Latin America in this area. Coordination of competition laws. They're going to try to deal with air and maritime services, which escapes most regional trade agreements. They're going to work on capital and labor mobility, increased services, market opening, freer movement of business visitors, e-commerce, education, scientific research cooperation. This is the list of objectives. Obviously, we don't know yet how many, or for that matter, any of them are really going to be furthered. They also accept, including Mexico, they all have a great deal of interest in mining and primary products exports, so there'll be some work there. There's talk about labor mobility and energy integration. Sounds like it's a long way off, and dealing with AP. So you've got a fairly complicated administrative structure, which I won't bore you with. It's all available on the web. In theory, they are going to have eliminated 92% of their duties by tariff line by the end of this year. We will see. I haven't seen anything comprehensive yet in this area, but that's what they've been talking about. Why is it here? I think my view, at least, having talked to a lot of diplomats, particularly in Chile, is that they really are interested in encouraging putting all 4 countries in a better position to encourage their trade with Asia. Obviously, if you listen to Evo Morales and Rafael Correa, this is all designed to be a foil to the economic and political power of Mercosur. My sense is that's a factor, but I don't think it's the driving factor. But I think we'll hear more of it as more of that as if the Pacific Alliance goes forward. I think there's been a lot of analysis of Mercosur by these 4 governments officials, in part to try to avoid some of the problems that Mercosur has had over the last 20 years, and to see if they can make it work better. As I see it, am I okay on time? How much time do I have? All right, I'll continue until somebody says stop or comes close to stop. About 5 more minutes, I think. There are a lot of challenges that I see and others see here that are obvious ones. First of all, these 4 countries do not have a lot of complementarity in what they want to export. They're all heavily dependent on primary product exports, agriculture, fuels, and things of that sort. They don't, except Mexico, are major manufacturing hubs. There are obviously situations that are going to require a lot of regulatory coordination, and in order to avoid obstacles in trade, they've obviously got to deal with long distances by sea or air from Peru and Colombia on the south to Peru and Chile on the south, and Colombia and Mexico to the north. They are trying to improve and coordinate areas which have been very, very difficult in Latin America in the past, education and training being among the most difficult ones. Obviously, there are opportunities, particular for Asian tourism in the area, for example. So it will be interesting to see how they tackle these issues and how they prioritize them. Will they be effective working together in developing new markets in Asia? Again, something to be seen. How will it relate to other economic groups in Latin America? All of these countries have some sort of FTA linkage with the Mercosur group, and of course with many other countries. From a lawyer's point of view, the Professor Baiguati's spaghetti bowl set of issues is obviously a serious potential obstacle if you have a lot of conflicts that are going to confuse everybody as to which of these agreements applies when you have multiple agreements covering the same countries, as, for example, you will if the Trans-Pacific Partnership goes forward. They all lack sufficient investment in infrastructure, roads and ports and railroads and things of that sort, and certainly energy in a number of these countries, including Chile. They have to, I think, it's going to be difficult to increase regional trade significantly. The risk, I think, always when you look at Latin America, including Mercosur, is will they be able to deliver on a lot of the objectives and the promises. When you look at the mediocre performance of Mercosur in recent years, the almost moribund Andean group, the problems with Aladi, the ALBA, the Bolivarian People's Alliance, and then you talk about the Alianza del Pacifico, and everybody says it is going to be different. So we will see. I think there is some enthusiasm in the U.S. and the Japanese and some of the Asian business communities, and that will increase, particularly if this 92% tariff elimination actually does take place by January. But it's always, it's the follow-through that makes the things work or not work. As everybody knows, the first 5-8 years of Mercosur actually were quite promising, and then things sort of slowed down for a whole variety of reasons. If they can move forward and do joint trade promotion and common approaches to tariff and rules of origin and all of the nitty-gritty that makes trade work better, maybe this will be helpful, particularly for smaller businesses, and have a significant impact. I think it's fair to say that the urgency of a group of completing and making these groups work is being stimulated by what's going on in recent months in Geneva and at the moment in Bali, Indonesia, where once again the likelihood of even very limited progress in terms of WTO agreements on things like trade facilitation are being essentially being held up in this particular case by a group that includes Bolivia, Argentina, and Venezuela. I think one of the obvious results of the inability of governments to do much in the WTO in Geneva is there will continue to be a proliferation of regional trade agreements beyond the 400 that exist at the present time. Again, most of these countries are part of the TPP. They're not involved in the U.S.-European agreement or the Regional Cooperative Economic Partnership in Asia, although one could argue that they ought to be involved in the latter. So we are looking at a situation where regional agreements, I think, very clearly are going to be the place where trade liberalization takes place in the coming years. And the issue is, will this one, which has started out, I think, very promising way, actually meet its objectives, or at least some of its major objectives. Thank you.